Welcome, everyone. As we start getting settled in and everything, I just want to say this is my fourth time to SQL Bits, the second time presenting in person, because COVID was a fun time for everyone. But I'm happy to be in here. It's cool to actually be in the auditorium today. Once I do introductions and everything else, if you all don't mind, I will actually want to do a little selfie with the room, because this is a pretty cool room to be able to present in. But we'll be going through a lightning talk today. And I just need to switch to the slides, which will be number one. There we go. All right. So what we'll be talking about is a lot of ways to kind of upgrade enhance and find some fun utilizations for tooltips, both native and report page. But to do that, I'll do a really quick and brief introduction since we only have about 20 minutes. So my name's Reid. I've been doing analytics and BI for about 11 years now. I started with Power Pivot all the way back into this. This is almost my 100th presentation that I've done at conferences. I think I'm at about 97 now, so nearly into the triple digits at this point of presenting, but it's something I continue to love to do and enjoy, and I really just appreciate being able to be involved in the community and hang out with the crowd. So, like I said, I do know that we only have a limited amount of time, so I will want to get started on the topics and everything related to that. But last mention here is as you're leaving, if you want any stickers or anything else, we'll have those here. I'll also have a raffle at the end. I recently designed a T-shirt that will be available as for the raffle. 3 raffle winners that I'll pick out, and I'll be able to ship you a T-shirt in your size rather than having to wear a too large or too small shirt that I hand out to someone in the crowd today. So that will also be available. But given 20 minutes, what I'll try to do is get through as many of these as I can, but with many of my talks, I like to scale them up and down. This could easily be a 60-minute talk, but I will get through what I can in 20 minutes. We'll probably get through about the top 4, but you'll learn a lot of cool stuff. Anything we don't cover, I have an extensive YouTube channel with a few hundred videos at this point, and lots of additional resources that I'll be happy to link you to. But like I said, with that, one thing I like to do is just get a fun little selfie with the group. So let's see if I can get about right into the middle. All right, everybody looks like, pretend that they're having a good time. Hey, there you go. And I'll hand this off to someone down here. If you don't mind, just get a couple pictures while I probably don't want to toss the phone with Murphy's Law and everything. Yeah, there you go. All right, perfect. So with that being said, this is a demo-driven session, so let's actually start to get into playing with some visualizations and tooltips. So to start the conversation, one thing I want to talk about is native versus report page tooltips. So a report page tooltip is the ability to basically create a second hidden page that allows us to visualize, design it, build out charts, graphs, all sorts of other stuff. And one thing that I found out a couple of years ago through like a happy accident is that there's actually a performance consideration between the two of them. So not only can you create a richer tooltip page that provides visualizations and other stuff versus just standard text readouts, but there's a performance implication between the two of them. So I have 2 visuals here that have basically just shotgunned a lot of metrics onto it to kind of show you the performance considerations between it. But we have a standard tooltip that's showing up here, just with a lot of additional details in the native tooltips well. Additionally, those exact same fields are in the tooltip below here. I basically used a multi-row card, threw a bunch of calculations into there to show a similar concept with a report tooltip page that we have onto the actual canvas here on the page that's hidden in this section that's attached to that visual. But what I want us to observe is watch what happens when I turn on the performance analyzer. And some of you already might know where this is going, but the performance analyzer allows us to observe any changes that are happening on the page, what's being calculated. So the native tooltips, nothing's happening, nothing's showing up over there. But if I come to this, so it starts to calculate those, because the difference is what happens is that the information on the other page is calculated in real time. It's important to consider that. So I want to show you not only the performance analyzer, but if I click on more options and I go show as table, I just get that information. That is what is pre-calculated. Go away, error message. It didn't close, so it's fine. You know what? The gremlins can disappear. They can go somewhere else. But you can see that it's a very small table structure, not a lot of information being returned for this visual on this page. So because of that, the additional data is calculated in real time on the report page tooltip. Now, the native visual, let's take a look using the show as table. all of that information is pre-calculated into there. So one thing to actually think about, not only are report page tooltips useful to visualize the data, but if you have a very large model, maybe even something with direct query or anything that has considerations where you do need additional context for more data to be shown in the tip when you hover over it, but the visual is just taking too long to render every time you click a slicer or anything else, one thing you can do is kind of split apart the logic. You can choose to display in the visual whatever you need to graphically, but then additional contextual information that is needed for the hover can be basically segmented off onto a report tooltip page, and then the performance won't really hit until you start to hover. That's one of the reasons you see that little bit of a blur effect as soon as you start to hover over this. It takes just a second or so. Maybe if I get, there you go. It kind of blurs out for a minute because it just needs to calculate that information and then render it. So if you hit any of those scenarios where you have a larger model that needs to be able to kind of separate those out and you want to kind of milk just a little bit of extra performance out of your page, one consideration for report page tooltips outside of just the visualization aspect can be that you can start to separate these and have the calculations happen in real time. And most of the time, like, give it, a quarter of a second, something, whatever it takes to render this, isn't really enough of an impact that the customer is going to be necessarily bothered or concerned with that. But it allows that visual natively just to render a little bit faster. Generally, my rule of thumb is it's about 3 seconds. If a slicer selection or anything else on the page, if it takes longer than 3 seconds for the visuals to recalculate the information, that's when I start looking at performance improvements. If it's anything up to 3 seconds, I'm not even going to bother because the customer's usually not even going to tell at that point. But this is one consideration that you can have to slowly start to split apart your calculations. I would also just argue, generally, you probably don't want 12 to 15 things in your tooltip. That's a bit too much information and you're going to hit a bit of a cognitive load. But I put a lot in there just to show the performance implication between the two of them. But that's one extra added bonus to those report pages is it splits apart when the calculations happen. So tip number 1 for this. 37, all right. So what I'm going to do to move on to this is another thing that we can do with tooltips is we have native versus report page tooltips. There is also a type of tooltip that can be included in the header. Now, this is something that I have learned and modified from another MVP, Matt Allington, from years ago, and it's a very useful way to add tutorials or information into a visualization. So the help tooltip that's built in to the top of a visual is something that allows us to have a little helper icon. But what you can do instead of just simply having a bit of text into there, you can actually attach it to a page and you can have some kind of a tutorial related to it. So this is from a couple of products that I was building for another client, but it's basically a little tutorial showing them how to use a page. So you can actually create some kind of an animated GIF using some kind of a screen recorder tool, and then that can basically help to show them how to utilize something. A common scenario that I've done with this is showing how to use the hierarchy. So it will be a tutorial that kind of walks through how to navigate each of the hierarchy buttons, and it provides a quick little tutorial for that. Now this was made, and I'll actually show the page for it. So essentially, you have the Canvas page here, and it will look a little bit broken. You'll get that build visuals for your data, like nothing's on it. But if you go to the page background and you add as image a GIF file into the background, that little extra thing disappears and then it renders on whatever visual header you add. So it's a way to include a video tutorial, maybe even some text overlays onto there. Generally, you don't want it more than maybe 5 seconds or so, but it will allow for quick tutorials to explain how to leverage or use any information or any visual that you have onto the page. So I've incorporated this quite a few times, and it's a very useful way to not necessarily have to have them watch a dedicated YouTube video. It can be built directly in. And like I mentioned, that is just the Canvas background. So you can go to Image, Browse, and just simply add a GIF image in there. Personally, I used Camtasia to make that, but there's many different tools out there that can allow you to make quick and easy free GIFs to be able to add as little animated tutorials. All right, tip number 2, perfect. Now, this one, I want to see if anybody can guess how I built to this and what I'm using. So I'm going to zoom in. There we go. I have a report page tooltip that is changing the visual with a countdown slider at the bottom to actually tell you when that change is going to occur. Any guesses on what things I added to that page to not only rotate the selection, but what did I use to make the animated, basically countdown bar at the bottom? Any suggestions? What do you think that might be? Play axis, yes, that is the thing that rotates through it. Because essentially this came about because a client asked me, I want to be able to slice, thank you, my report page tooltips. And we're like, well, let's drill through. If you want an interactive detail page that has the filter propagated from 1 to 2, that's a drill through page, they still wanted a tooltip. So my solution was first to add a play axis countdown. After I added this though, my immediate thought is, well, it's kind of jarring. If I'm looking at the data and I don't know when it's going to flip, I don't want to have to sit there and count down in my head how many seconds until the next change is going to occur. So I reached out to a friend of mine, Daniel Marsh-Patrick. That's the only context that I'll give. But does anybody know what he builds? What tool does he make? He makes Deneb, which is a custom visual designer. So I had him help me design in Deneb a basically small little custom visual at the bottom that basically helps to give you visual context on when that change is going to occur. And we spent some time on that. We actually have a couple of YouTube videos on it. But collectively, I think it allows you to observe categorical changes throughout that, plus having the context, at least, of knowing when the next bit of information is going to come. So I will at least show you some of the visuals. I'll link you to the videos later on if you want to actually see how the custom visual is built and all the code that goes into it using the Deneb tool. It's an amazing bespoke visual builder. So if you ever need to explore building custom visuals, I highly recommend his tool. It's essentially like, I think when I talked to him at one point, he says he spent a few thousand hours over like the last couple of years building this custom visual builder. It's something you can get from the App Store, but it's truly amazing. The files that you'll have a link to later on will have access to this, all sorts of links to be able to connect to the visuals that he builds. But that visual page here, we have Deneb here at the bottom. I'll just kind of lightly show it. Just go to edit mode. And yeah, there you go. So that's the Deneb custom visual builder. You can basically copy and paste the Vega language code. It allows you to build anything you want to. It can be a violin chart. It can be a countdown like this. I've seen people build lollipop charts. Basically, any type of visual you'd ever want to build, this tool can do it. But it can be very highly customized. And he used some basically interval scripts to actually do the timer countdown related to that. But super cool way to just basically have your imagination be the only limit to what you can build. The thing that's the most important part of this, because that was just extra icing on the cake, is the fact that I have a play axis slicer. It's a custom visual that's been in the App Store for about 5 years now. And essentially what it does is anything that you put on here, you just have a setup to choose your animation settings, auto start, your loop, and your timer. Before Microsoft had a way to auto refresh pages to connect it to direct query, this is basically the hack that most Power BI developers would use to automatically slice and refresh the page if you ever wanted to auto refresh a particular report page. The one consideration that I'll mention is that I cannot have this hidden. So if this is hidden on the page, it will stop actually slicing. So the easiest solution to that, just make sure that it's just behind whatever other visual. Because you can never click into the report page tooltip anyways, so just hidden in the background, stays in there, cycles through it, and that accommodated the client scenario that I needed to of a dynamic selection or changing selection for a report tooltip page. But it gives you a lot of ideas on like how highly customized those can be because you have a blank canvas on those particular report pages. All right, let's go to the next thing in our lightning round, which will be field parameter tooltips. Raise of hands, who here has used field parameters since they came out last year? So many people, this is great. One of my favorite features to come out for Power BI, and I have a little bit of time, so soapboxing for 60 seconds. The fact that the easiest one is just measure switching. We've been able to do that for years. There's a little bit of DAX and a switch statement, disconnected table, but you could do it in 15 minutes, not super hard. Switching an axis, though, was nightmarish to do in a model. If you actually wanted to be able to have a slicer that let you pick from continent to customer segment to product category, whatever it might be. You'd have to have a special table, at least for me, multiple inactive relationships, a lot of fancy DAX, and it was horrible to maintain in a model. And then it became super easy as soon as we had field parameters. So I love them as a feature. But I had a thought of, what if I had a visual with a field parameter, in this case, just two things from a demo data set, channel name, product category. Searching the axis, beautiful thing, super easy to implement. Now, kind of a keep your eye on the bird scenario here. Check out the tooltip. Right now, I am showing total sales by continent when channel name is displayed. I'm going to go to product category. Total sales by subcategory. So the tooltip page that is displayed here is also changing dynamically the axis depending on what the axis is here. Any ideas on how I'm getting these two to communicate? Because they're separate field parameters in the model. There is two field parameter tables in here. I have my tooltip selection and field selection. Do you think if you were to guess between DAX or a relationship, what do you think is the trigger for this? Any guesses? I like that there's not, because it just makes that much more of a unique solution. So there is a relationship between the two of them. Because one of the things that's automatically added to a tooltip page is a field selection order, which is an ID column. So basically what I did is I created two of those, and I'll show you the tables of each. Let's go to field selection. So field selection channel name, field selection order, 0. And let's take a look at this one, tooltip selection. Continent, 0. So basically, with these related to each other, if I select from one, it automatically then filters the other table to one selection, which then triggers the field parameter effect. So that relationship keeps these in sync with each other. And then one slicer from this table will then automatically propagate to this other one, and that's the one that's being used on my report page tooltip. So you can actually keep your axes in sync this way between the top level visual and whatever the report page visual is as well. So it's a nice way to keep the two of those together. As one other mention, just for another YouTuber that I really like a lot, is Boz, who begrudgingly has managed to skyrocket to over 100,000 subscribers in slightly less than 2 years, but does some really cool stuff. He utilized tooltips to also actually dynamically change the axis where if you have a date range, if you select 5 years, it shows you at the year level. If you select 6 months or less, or 12 months or less, it goes to the month level. If you select a month or less, it automatically changes the axis to the date level. So there's a lot of ways to dynamically change your axis and sync together with slicer selections. But I love the possibilities of field parameters because they're so useful. But this is a great way to kind of show contextually relevant categories and subcategories, basically, depending on what you're displaying on the top page. So I managed to get through the top 4. We're at 47, so that will be a couple minutes left. So what I want to do is at this point open up to some questions, as well as also provide some links based off what we have here. So we'll pop this up. QR code here will take you to the main website. I'll also have a couple of other codes for a blog raffle sign-up. So I'll leave this up for a little bit. The slide after this will have the raffle sign-up for my shirt, but I do want to see if there's any questions why I have this up for a minute on anything tooltip related. Yes? It will default back to basically it's the top one. So if there is no selection, it's the first for a field parameter. It's a little different from the selected value, which returns blank. So you'll always get something returned, but great question. If no slicer selection essentially is selected at the top, the first in the list of the field parameter is the default that will get returned for that. With this also being up, I have 2 more QR codes. This one will be a blog raffle sign up. It puts you onto a form which just asks for name and info, signs you up for the blog, also enters you to the raffle for the shirt that I can mail to you. I'll pick 3 out of that, and then 1 more minute to leave up for this, and then I'll have the QR code for feedback, which will be always wonderful to get. So any other questions as I leave this up for a minute? And it's also blinding, so I just want to make sure I don't miss any hands. Yes, right over there. Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, would it be possible to do more than 2? So my last example had just 2 categories that were shown, and essentially you could have up to 5. So as long as you have the same amount in both. So if you had 5 in your main one, 5 in your other one, as you switch through them, that sort order would still continue to key each and every one. So I very often even had that where I've had native tooltips that actually even switch through what's being displayed where they're offset by one, but there's so many different ways to actually key the two of them together. But I would say there's plenty of ways to explore having those relationships and keeping them in sync when you select one that automatically updates other field parameters as well. last link, and just to make sure I can get out in time. So the feedback for the session in general, myself and any other presenters here, we always welcome feedback. I love to be able to hear things that worked, didn't work, ways to improve. Even at 100 sessions, I'm always wanting to get better at this. So please submit some feedback for this. Again, there'll be stickers being handed out here at the end, a couple of those as well, if anybody wants some cool laptop stickers for all of you guys. But any final questions as we wrap up for the day? Yes, in the back. Say it again a little bit louder. Oh, yes, yeah, thank you. What was the tool I used to create the GIF? So because I do a lot of videos, I use Camtasia, which is a little bit of a pricier version of like a screen recorder, but I would say for a quick and easy way to create a GIF, Snagit. Snagit is made by Camtasia, the same company. It's a great screen capture tool, which you can annotate, but you also can do short videos. So if you wanted to like highlight a section of your screen, record a little GIF, and then immediately just save it in 5 minutes or less, Snagit is a wonderful tool for that. Perfect. I think, and we are at time, so I will wrap up. I'll be over on the side answering any other questions, but I want to thank you all for attending today, and have a great rest of your sessions at SQLBits.